Let's get back to that story we couldn't bring you a bit earlier on. The American Federation of Teachers has teamed up with self-styled online misinformation tool NewsGuard to warn tens of millions of children against sites like RT. Yet the private filtering service greenlights mainstream media that have consistently had to retract false stories. Well, fingers crossed, here's Caleb Maupin on it. Second time. Let's give it a go.
Now, there is plenty of fake news these days flooding the internet. So why not help American school kids learn how to sift through it, determine who they can trust and who they can't, think for themselves? It sounds pretty reasonable. The American Federation of Teachers is now stepping up to the plate.
The American Federation of Teachers has launched a national partnership with a leading anti-misinformation tool, NewsGuard, to protect and champion legitimate journalism and fact-based reporting and to help educators and their students navigate a sea of online disinformation.
But it's not just about teaching kids to think critically. The future of the free world is at stake. NewsGuard will save our democracy. Young minds must be protected.
It is a beacon of clarity to expose the dark depths of the internet and uplift those outlets committed to truth and honesty rather than falsehoods and fabrications.
Now, with the American Federation of Teachers arranging for all of its member educators to have free access to NewsGuard at a time when misinformation is such a growing threat to public health and our democracy, millions more of America's students will also be NewsGuarding it.
NewsGuard makes a special list of outlets it considers to be trustworthy and untrustworthy. And then it puts a special label in your web browser. Now, if NewsGuard approves, you get a green label. But if NewsGuard disapproves, you get a red label. So you guessed it, RT and Sputnik get a red label. Switch off immediately. Don't let those Russians get inside your head and encourage you to question our fearless American leaders. But what outlets are safe? Well, there's BuzzFeed, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and don't forget the official U.S. government outlet called Voice of America. Now, do you remember when The Washington Post told us that Russia had hacked the power grids? That wasn't true. Do you remember when BuzzFeed ran with the story about Trump and the Steele dossier, and that turned out to be from a source that was pretty non-credible? Now, do you remember when almost all the mainstream media outlets told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and we just had to invade? Do you remember all the lies we were told in the lead-up to the NATO intervention in Libya? But let's not be too hard on NewsGuard. After all, they themselves admit these labels are not a measure of factual accuracy. They only label websites that they determine to have a hidden agenda.
Our green-red ratings signal if a website is trying to get it right or instead has a hidden agenda or knowingly publishes falsehoods or propaganda, giving readers more context about their news online.
So it's not about what's really true and what's not true. It's about if you're telling the truth with good intentions or whether or not you're telling the truth in a way that might stir up some trouble. Now, one of the founders is Gordon Kravitz, a former columnist for the Wall Street Journal. His reporting on the NSA and Edward Snowden has been widely criticized. It appears he was trying to spin things as not so bad on the part of the American government. And then there's Richard Stengel. He worked at the State Department as public affairs chief under Barack Obama. Now, he must be totally opposed to any disinformation or distortions in media, right?
My old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist. I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful.
Some conservatives in America feel threatened by the teachers' unions embracing NewsGuard.
The left has found a dangerous and equally disingenuous new way to indoctrinate our children without their parents knowing. This is as bad as CRT. In fact, it's worse. Unlike CRT, the left is not going to give it a name this time. This is purposely designed to go under the radar of public scrutiny.
In America, we're always told about those evil totalitarian countries where the government brainwashes children and tells them not to question authority. And here in America, we're said to be great because we teach our children to have free and open minds and think for themselves. And now we have NewsGuard to make sure that their free and open minds are never exposed to anything that might tempt them to question more. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.